Fiona's whisper floated like a fragile thread in the stale air. "If you carry me upstairs, I'll tell you a secret." The words, soft and urgent, anchored Marcus in the moment, suspending his usual world of glass towers and power. Her small hands clutched his shirt tightly, her weight light, but her presence heavy with unspoken gravity. Behind him, the elevator hummed, its polished doors a stark contrast to the peeling paint, cracked tiles, and mildew scent that enveloped the stairwell. The rusted banister scraped cold against his fingertips as he reached for it, its rough texture a reminder of the decay surrounding them. Dampness clung to the walls, pressing the smell of mold into his lungs with every breath, yet Fiona's dark eyes shone bright, daring him beyond the grime. Marcus's heart thundered in conflict. Every fiber screamed to retreat back into the safe, sanitized world of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. But here, on these rickety stairs, a child's whispered promise challenged his very identity. Could he risk everything for a secret, carried by someone so small, so seemingly powerless? The weight of Fiona shifted on his back, not just her body, but the weight of a future unknown, fragile and trembling. He felt the tug of her hope, the silent plea in her eyes, as if this secret might bridge two worlds, hers of hardship and his of privilege. Each step creaked beneath them, echoing a deeper tension. Marcus struggled with the dissonance between his meticulous control and the chaos of this moment. What lay beyond that worn door? What truth could change everything he thought he knew, and perhaps everything they both needed? The secret was not just Fiona's, it was something bigger, a key to a revolution born in hardship, but fueled by dreams and resilience. In that instant, Marcus faced a pivotal choice that would crack the facade of his formal image and force him into a reality far rawer, far more real. You just heard a child beg for help. If you feel even a flicker of anger at a world that lets this happen, subscribe. Or tell me in the comments why you wouldn't. I'll wait. The narrow hallway felt tighter than it was, the chipped paint and faded wallpaper unable to hide decades of stories etched into its walls. Fiona's small apartment, a modest refuge in a city that often forgot it's forgotten, was nestled deep within this worn building, a world away from the cold, polished luxury of Marcus Caldwell's glass tower. Inside, the air shimmered with a quiet resilience born from years of love and struggle. Fiona sat on the threadbare rug, the soft sunlight filtering through the stained window casting a warm glow on her face. Her fingers traced invisible patterns in the air, as if drawing strength from the stories her grandmother shared every evening, the tales of ancestors who fought battles not just for survival, but for dignity. Her grandmother, a woman whose silver hair framed a face weathered by hardship but softened by kindness, sat nearby mending a ragged sweater. The rhythmic click of her needles was a comforting counterpoint to the distant hum of the city. Despite the scarcity that filled their days, with hand-me-down shoes too small for her feet and cupboards too often bare, Fiona's spirit remained unbreakable. "We walk with the strength of those who came before us," her grandmother would say, eyes twinkling with steadfast hope. "No matter how heavy our burdens, we carry them proudly." Fiona understood that strength well. She had learned to find beauty in the smallest moments, a shared smile with a neighbor, the scent of rain on dusty streets, the feel of worn leather beneath her fingertips in shoes passed down from someone who had also dreamed. These fragments of life stitched together a fierce belief that though their world was cracked and faded, its heart beat with possibility. Far above, in a world seemingly untouched by such struggles, Marcus Caldwell moved through the pristine corridors of his penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city sprawling beneath him, a maze of light and shadow, success and desperation. His life was a series of calculated moves and billion-dollar deals, a quiet storm of control and influence. Yet, despite the wealth and power coursing through every aspect of his existence, a silence hovered in his penthouse, a silence filled both with achievements and an unspoken emptiness. The distant laughter of children playing in the park below, the chatter of street vendors, and the subtle life of the city felt alien to him, like echoes from a place he could acknowledge but rarely understand. Marcus often found himself torn between two worlds, one of glass and steel where he held dominion, and another hidden beneath those towers, where people fought daily battles that no deal could resolve. His encounter with Fiona, so vulnerable and yet so full of promise, unsettled him more than he expected. The urgency in her whispered secret echoed in his mind long after she left his sight. "This secret isn't just mine," she had said softly. Those words clung to him like a fragile thread, pulling him toward a truth that neither world had yet dared to confront. He thought of the choices that had defined his life. Boardroom encounters that shaped city skylines. Contracts written in sterile offices far from the grit and hope he saw in Fiona's eyes. In that moment, Marcus felt the walls between his two realities begin to tremble. What was this secret that a small girl from a forgotten stairwell could carry? Could it possibly hold the power to bridge worlds so seemingly opposite? The creak of distant stairs reminded Marcus of the weight of the decision before him. Beneath the veneer of power, beneath the walls of privilege, thrummed a pulse of something urgent and raw. He realized that his choice could no longer be about preserving an image or maintaining distance. It had to be about confronting reality, however uncomfortable. In the dim light of the apartment, Fiona's gaze met his with steady resolve, the kind only children born into hardship possess. It was a look that said, "We are not invisible. We carry dreams larger than these crumbling walls." As Marcus stood there, the city's noise faded to a distant murmur. His mind raced with what lay ahead, a journey that demanded more than money or influence, one that required belief in something beyond the bottom line. He thought again of the secret, fragile but alive, carried on Fiona's breath and woven into the stories of countless others. A secret born from pain, but blossoming with hope. Together, Marcus thought, maybe we can change the narrative. Not just for Fiona, but for all of us. Outside the apartment, the city breathed on. Equal parts struggle and strength, loss and hope. Two worlds poised on the edge of connection, separated by a worn door, but linked by a secret waiting to be told. Think of the children you've seen begging in the streets. Did you help, or did you look away? Hit subscribe if you believe stories like Fiona's deserve to be told. The door creaked open on rusty hinges, revealing a room caught between time and trial. Peeling wallpaper curled in layers, some etched with faint doodles or the marks of children long grown. The broken heater sat silent in the corner, a cold sentinel against winter's bite. Dust danced softly in shafts of light that filtered through the grimy window, showing flaking paint and cracked plaster. Yet, in this fragile shell of an apartment, a warmth blossomed, radiating not from heat or light, but from something far deeper. Fiona stepped inside with a quiet pride, her small feet soundless on the faded rug. Her dark eyes shone, holding a vision born of sweat and dreams, hardship and hope. "This is where it starts," she whispered, not just to Marcus, but as a hymn to the generations who had called this place home. The walls around them seemed to listen, bearing witness to years of struggle etched in every scratch and stain. Yet these battered walls held more than the echoes of hardship. They cradled a future shaped by kindness, unity, and ingenuity. A future Fiona carried not just in words, but in a fire burning bright enough to defy decay. She told Marcus about the secret at the heart of her whispered promise, a vision to lift the neighborhood not with money, but with community. It was a plan stitched together from acts of kindness becoming catalysts, neighbors uniting to share dreams and skills, and creativity turning scarcity into opportunity. A world where broken heaters might be fixed by shared effort and peeling walls painted anew with collective pride. Her voice was steady, young but unyielding. "We don't have billions," Fiona said, "but we have each other. And that's the secret." Marcus took in every detail. The faded family photos taped to the cracked plaster, the makeshift shelves held up by hope and nails, the scent of worn books and fresh paint dreams. Yet beneath admiration, a storm of doubts surged within him. The billionaire's mind raced through costs, reputations at risk, resources stretched, critics ready to pounce. Aligning with a cause so far removed from his world felt like stepping onto a stage where every move might be condemned. He wrestled with his fear of ridicule, the whispers that might follow, the investors who'd question his judgment. His carefully crafted persona teetered on the edge as he faced the undeniable truth in Fiona's eyes. She was not just asking for help. She was asking for belief, for action. If you won't fight, who will? Her question sliced through the doubts like a blade, leaving Marcus exposed to a truth he could no longer ignore. It was a challenge, a dare, a call beyond words. In the silence that followed, he felt the magnitude of the moment when comfort must be cast aside and responsibility claimed. This was no longer a game of power or prestige. It was a crossroads of conscience and courage. Marcus glanced back at the fragile world behind the worn door, the world Fiona carried on her shoulders and in her spirit. The secret was a seed, small but potent, capable of growing into something that could change more than just a single block or life. With a slow breath, Marcus realized that the real risk was not in standing with her, but in walking away. Are you Marcus right now? Too comfortable to risk helping? Subscribe if you know comfort can make us blind, or comment why you'd walk away. The city's skyline gleamed under the afternoon sun, its towering glass structures reflecting ambition and prosperity. But behind this polished facade simmered a ruthless game of power and greed, one that would soon crash into the fragile world Marcus and Fiona were trying to protect. Veronica Kane strode into the executive district with purpose, every step a declaration of dominance. Known as Marcus Caldwell's fiercest rival and a merciless developer, Veronica had built her empire by tearing down neighborhoods and turning compassion into collateral damage. Her tailored suit cut sharp lines against the soft carpets of the boardroom, and her eyes gleamed with cold calculation. To her, land was never just land. It was a weapon, Marcus thought, watching her from a distance. Veronica's reputation sent shivers through the community below, where families like Fiona's lived crowded lives filled with both hardship and hope. Now, that hope was under siege. Back in the neighborhood, the sound of slamming doors and hurried footsteps echoed down narrow streets. Eviction notices, stamped bold in red ink, plastered onto peeling walls, shattered the fragile sense of security like shards of glass. Families who had called the block home for generations faced the grim reality of displacement. The smell of dust and decay mixed with a creeping scent of fear. Mothers clutched children tightly as neighbors whispered warnings of what was coming, their voices trembling but resolute. Fiona's grandmother looked at her small shoes, the same ones Fiona had been given years ago, and allowed herself a rare moment of anger to rise like a storm. Marcus was caught in the swirl of these colliding worlds. His sleek office, filled with the quiet hum of high-powered deals, suddenly felt suffocating. His ambition warred with a rising sense of responsibility, and Veronica's shadow loomed large, threatening to swallow everything. Politicians, once neutral onlookers, had been bought and sold in Veronica's campaign to push through the demolition orders. Council meetings became scripted performances, echo chambers where dissent was drowned by the clinking of glasses and whispered deals behind closed doors. One afternoon, a sharp-suited lawyer arrived, offering a glimmer of hope, a legal stay to halt the evictions. His polished words, carefully rehearsed and dipped in sympathy, raised the spirits of the community. For a fleeting moment, it seemed the tide might turn. But trust was a fragile thing. Behind closed doors, the lawyer smiled coldly as a veiled call came through, Veronica's influence a dark thread woven into the city's fabric. The carefully built promise of help was a deception, a betrayal born of ambition and greed. Marcus watched this betrayal deepen with clenched fists and a heavy heart. The clock was merciless, counting down 30 days until the demolition order became irreversible. Each tick echoed the urgency, the mounting pressure pressing down on everyone involved. Protests sprang up in the streets, voices rising in unified defiance, but many were silenced by threats, bribes, or unexplained disappearances. Resistance began to wane as exhaustion set in, and Fiona's community, so full of spirit, faced exhaustion and despair. In moments of quiet, Marcus felt the full weight of the challenge ahead. The choice was clear, but daunting. To stand and fight meant risking everything, his reputation, his alliances, even safety. To retreat meant abandoning a people desperate for hope. Across the city, Veronica's smile grew colder, her plans tightening like a noose. She saw the block not as a home, but as a stepping stone, one more prize in her relentless ascent. But even as she schemed, whispers of courage stirred in the shadows. Fiona's vision burned brighter than ever as the community rallied, refusing to be erased without a fight. The stakes had never been higher, and the battle for the block was only just beginning. If this injustice makes your blood boil, join us with a subscribe. If not, say why you'd stay silent while families lose their homes. The dawn light filtered weakly through the towering glass facade of Marcus Caldwell's corporate headquarters, casting a cold sheen over the city that seemed to reflect his shifting fortunes. Once hailed as a titan of industry and philanthropist, Marcus found himself swallowed by a storm that threatened everything he had built. Outside, the media frenzy was relentless, flashing cameras, accusatory headlines, and reporters hungry for every whisper of scandal. Marcus Caldwell, billionaire or villain, blared one headline. Another read, From Hero to Rogue, the Fall of a City Icon. Night after night, television panels dissected his every move, painting him as a greedy opportunist who had abandoned the community he once vowed to help. Social media buzzed with outrage, as old allies turned their backs and new enemies lined up. Inside the walls of his ultra-modern boardroom, the atmosphere was tense and fractured. The faces around the polished mahogany table were grim and unfamiliar. Board members who had once praised his vision now exchanged wary glances and guarded words. Marcus could feel the Cold War unfolding in real time. Whispers behind hands, subtle gestures of disapproval, and factions forming like silent landmines beneath the surface. His closest confidants, those he had trusted to steer the company's course, now looked at him with suspicion. The air was thick with unspoken accusations and fears that his judgment had been compromised by his ties to the embattled neighborhood. One by one, alliances cracked. Alone in his corner office, Marcus stared out over the cityscape. Steel and glass monuments to success that now felt like fragile facades hiding cracks that threatened collapse. The barber's chair of public opinion had turned him from a revered billionaire idol into a pariah. The isolation cut deeper than any legal threat or financial blow. Yet in the midst of his personal and professional turmoil, a flicker of hope illuminated the darker edges of this crisis. Fiona, the small but fiercely determined girl whose dreams had first sparked Marcus's sense of purpose, now stood as a rallying light for the community. Though battered and frayed, the neighborhood had not surrendered. On cracked pavement and chipped stairs, neighbors gathered beneath handmade banners waving slogans of resilience. The murmur of voices rose into determined chants, echoing through the streets with newfound strength. Local grocers opened their shops early to host meetings and share updates. Churches and community centers became hubs of strategy and solidarity. This fight isn't just theirs, Marcus told himself, watching footage of Fiona speaking passionately at a rally. Her eyes burned with a fierce hope, igniting courage in others where despair had once taken root. The community had found its voice, and it was louder than any smear campaign or boardroom betrayal. Momentum grew as preliminary court rulings granted a temporary reprieve, an injunction delaying demolition orders and buying precious time. The neighborhood tasted a fragile victory, hope swelling in collective hearts as families dared to dream of holding on to their homes. For Marcus, it was a sign that not all was lost. But just as the movement inched forward, betrayal swept through its heart like a poisoned wind. Whispers surfaced that an insider, once a trusted member of the resistance, had been quietly negotiating with Veronica Kane, the merciless developer's ruthless lieutenant. A secret meeting here, a mysterious phone call there, leaks that quickly eroded the fabric of trust painstakingly woven. The revelation struck like a slap, sowing seeds of doubt among leaders and foot soldiers alike. Bonds frayed and suspicion fractured the once united front. Meetings grew tense, trust grew fragile, and arguments erupted in shadows. The community, bracing for a breakthrough, was thrust back into uncertainty. For Marcus, the blow was devastating. Hope and despair warred fiercely within him. Once the untouchable billionaire idol, now the architect of a movement compromised by deceit, he grappled with a growing sense of responsibility and failure. The journey that began with aspiration had become a crucible, testing not only his fortune but the essence of his character. He wrestled with bitter questions. Had he been naive to think power could be wielded for good? Could redemption be found in the rubble of broken promises? Was the community's faith in him misplaced? The pressure to choose a path grew heavier every day, threatening to crush his spirit beneath it. Still, amidst the despair, a quiet determination took root. The fight was no longer about balance sheets or public image. It was about resilience and redemption. Marcus knew the road ahead would be steep, marked by setbacks and scars, but the spark Fiona kindled kept his resolve burning. The city's skyline, once a symbol of unchallenged dominance, now mirrored a battleground marked by both conflict and hope. The movement to save the neighborhood was far from over. The struggle was reshaped but not defeated. Marcus, Fiona, and the community faced a crossroads where every decision could redefine their futures. If you've ever fought for something only to be betrayed, you know this pain. Subscribe if you want stories of resilience told, or explain why they don't matter to you. The rain tapped relentlessly against the glass walls of Marcus Caldwell's penthouse, a steady, haunting rhythm that matched the storm inside his conscience. The city, sprawling beneath him, flickered in the dim twilight, lights blurred by the downpour like fractured memories swirling in his mind. The discovery he had made earlier that day was not just unsettling, it threatened to bring his entire world crashing down. Marcus had spent years trying to redefine himself, to build a legacy that would outshine the shadow cast by his family's past. Yet in the dusty archives buried beneath corporate records and personal files, a damning truth had surfaced. The vast wealth and power he now wielded had roots firmly entangled in the very suffering of Fiona's block. Long before Marcus stepped onto the stage as a successful entrepreneur and philanthropist, his family's fortune was forged by exploiting that neighborhood, the heart of the community now so fiercely defended. Decades ago, his grandfather's company had orchestrated forced evictions, tearing families from their homes under the guise of progress, bulldozing entire blocks to clear way for developments that lifted profits while crushing livelihoods. The eviction notices, court documents, and developer memos were no longer faceless records. They were names, faces, and stories of people. Neighbors. Neighbors who were now standing shoulder to shoulder with Fiona, fighting against the very destruction Marcus's lineage had once commanded. The cold, yellowed contracts seemed to sear a brand into Marcus's soul, as if the sins of the past now belonged to him too. How many times had he spoken about hope and renewal, never fully grasping the depth of history beneath his feet? His public rhetoric of change, his commitment to the cause, now felt like fragile facades masking the truth too painful to confront. His phone buzzed repeatedly on the marble table beside him, each vibration a growing echo of reality. When he finally answered, the name on the screen was a sharp reminder of the stakes: Fiona. Her voice was steady, but edged with a tension Marcus hadn't heard before. "We need to talk," she said simply. "There are things I have to understand. About you, about what this all means." The line went silent after that, leaving Marcus alone with his guilt swirling in the storm's wake. He knew this conversation would be a turning point, a fragile intersection between potential reconciliation and outright collapse. The moral dilemma clawed at his thoughts like a relentless predator. Could redemption emerge from such a tainted legacy? Could truth and contrition mend the wounds inflicted by decades of exploitation? Or were some betrayals too deep, too irreparable for forgiveness? His entire life had been a blur of public triumphs and private doubts, but now the doubts screamed louder than ever. Marcus faced the stark realization that admission alone might not be enough to repair the fractured trust between himself and the community, or even within himself. The fight was no longer for business or reputation, it was for his very soul. Flashbacks flooded his mind. Childhood images of distant relatives talking coldly about demolishing neighborhoods. The booming construction sites of his youth, built on foundations wrested from people who looked much like Fiona's neighbors. He saw himself then, a boy unaware of the legacies woven around him, now a man forced to bear their consequences. Across town, Fiona prepared for the next rally, her own doubts mirrored in Marcus's shadows. She had to reconcile the man who stood as both antagonist and ally, someone whose history clashed so violently with the future they hoped to build together. Could she trust a man born of a legacy so dark? In late-night meetings and whispered conversations, a truth surfaced that deepened the complexity. "This secret isn't just mine," Marcus murmured to no one as he paced his suite. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity, the air inside charged with an electric blend of anxiety, anticipation, and a yearning for justice that transcended this room. Marcus Caldwell, once the untouchable titan of industry, stood at the center, no longer as the master of his empire, but as its reluctant accuser. The polished wooden panels, the imposing judge's bench, the rows of attentive jurors, and the sea of reporters with their cameras blinking like fireflies all converged on this defining moment. As the judge's gavel struck, silence parachuted down. Marcus took a deep breath. the weight of years of ambition, mistakes, and regret settling into his bones. Today was the day to face the empire he had built but could no longer protect. The stakes were higher than any merger or acquisition. This was about undoing the harm inflicted on a community that had called his actions a slow, painful betrayal. The prosecution's opening was swift, precise, and devastating. It laid bare the reckless plans that sought to raze homes, uproot lives, and replace vibrant neighborhoods with soulless skyscrapers. Internal documents revealed fabrications meant to mislead regulators. Testimonies revealed silenced dissenters and ignored warnings, and expert witnesses painted a harrowing picture of environmental and social devastation. One by one, residents wore courage like armor as they took the stand. A grandmother who lost the family home, a teacher robbed of her students' safe space, a small business owner watching dreams crumble. They told their stories, their voices trembling yet resolute, stitching a human tapestry of loss and hope. The courtroom hung on every word. Then came Marcus's time. The cameras zoomed in as he moved from accused to advocate. Gone was the corporate armor. His voice carried remorse tempered by determination. "I have sat where I am meant to lead," he began, eyes sweeping the courtroom. "But in doing so, I lost sight of those who stood at the margins. This community, these people, they are not just collateral damage. They are the heart of this city, and they deserve better." He recounted how meeting Fiona and hearing her voice, fragile yet commanding, awakened something he thought irredeemable. Playfully recalling the moment she whispered, "If you carry me upstairs, I'll tell you a secret." He now knew that secret was a call to arms for them all. "I testify against my own empire because justice must come before profit. This demolition ends, and this community will rise again, stronger and united." The courtroom was a crucible of tension as the trial wound through days fueled by law and heart. The media storm outside swelled into a roar. Headlines shouted the unraveling of a corporate Goliath, while social feeds teemed with support for the neighborhood's David. Supporters gathered, chanting Fiona's name, lighting candles and carrying signs that transformed simple streets into rallying grounds. Inside, the judge listened intently, and then, when the verdict came, it shattered the silence with thunderous finality. The demolition plans were halted, the perpetrators exposed, and the community given a chance to heal. Behind the courthouse, Marcus met Fiona's eyes, the same daring sparkle. He lifted her carefully onto his back, the worn stairs beneath them no longer threatening but symbolic, a pathway to renewal. "This secret," she said, her voice steady and clear, "is ours." Together they ascended, bridging worlds and witnessing the birth of something new. Justice, hard-fought and sweet, echoed in every step. Justice feels sweet, doesn't it? Subscribe if you believe stories like this can spark real change. If not, comment why justice is just a dream to you. The city pulsed quietly beneath a blanket of twilight, the harsh edges softened by slipping shadows and the gentle flicker of streetlights. The neighborhood that had once stood at the precipice of erasure now breathed with tentative hope, each rebuilt brick a testament to resilience and renewal. Amid the calm after the storm, a question lingered in the air, unmistakable and profound. Can a single child's voice spark a revolution? Fiona sat on the steps of the rebuilt community center, her fingers tracing the worn wood, the same wood where secrets had been whispered, promises made, and dreams first dared. The weight of what had transpired was immense, yet she spoke with a clarity born of quiet conviction. "The secret was never mine," she said softly, eyes lifting to meet those gathered around her. "It was always ours." Her words rippled like a stone cast into still water, touching every heart, every soul that had stood with her. The secret they carried together was not just a tale of struggle, but a shared vision, a collective will to rise, to protect, and to build a future defined not by destruction but by connection. Around her, faces reflected a mosaic of stories: the elderly woman who had lost her home but never her dignity, the young man who had found purpose in rebuilding broken playgrounds, the teacher whose classroom was again filled with laughter and learning. Each embodied a piece of the legacy Fiona spoke of, a legacy not owned by one, but nurtured by many. Beneath the surface of celebration, a moral challenge remained, a quiet but insistent call to consider the cost of silence and the courage required to speak truth in the face of overwhelming odds. The revolution they had sparked was more than bricks and mortar. It was a testament to voice and choice. Poetic and inspiring, the moment was bittersweet. The fight was won, but the path forward demanded vigilance and unity. The community's heartbeat had been restored, but the echoes of past neglect still whispered warnings. Could they sustain the change? Could they guard the fragile equilibrium between hope and despair? As the evening sky deepened into a velvet canvas speckled with stars, Fiona's gaze turned upward. "We are the keepers of this secret," she whispered, "and the makers of tomorrow's story. Let us choose to speak, to act, and to never forget the power of one voice." Her voice, though small, carried across the gathering, a beacon calling all to listen and engage. The legacy was clear. Silence might feel safer, quieter, but truth was the bridge to justice, connection, and transformation. The choice was theirs, and now the story belonged not to a single child or billionaire, but to a community reborn through shared hope and fierce determination. If you believe one voice can change the world, subscribe now. If you don't, tell me in the comments why silence is safer than truth. The night settled with a poignant stillness, a pause pregnant with possibility. This was not simply an ending, but a beginning, an invitation for every reader to consider their own voice, their own role in the unfolding revolution. For in every whispered secret and every echoed story, the smallest voice can indeed change the course of history.